My father-in-law came over for Christmas. No children, no seat at the table. My mother-in-law sneered when he asked why I wasn't joining them. My husband, usually smug, simply smirked. But their confident expressions disappeared the moment my father-in-law spoke. My name is Laura. I'm 37, work part-time as a line cook at a local diner, and I live with my husband, Scott. We've been together for 8 years. I used to work at a regional bank, but 3 years ago, I quit to focus on fertility treatments. After 2 grueling years, countless procedures, and an emotional roller coaster of hope and disappointment, we received the truth I couldn't conceive. That's when everything began to fall apart. At first, Scott tried to hide his disappointment, but over time, his demeanor changed. He grew cold and distant. His mother, Catherine, saw that as permission to treat me however she wished. I went from being the sweet daughter-in-law to the woman who couldn't give her grandchildren. Now, every weekend, Scott drives me to his parents' house, not to visit, but to work. I clean, scrub, cook, and serve while they sit and chat about movies or politics. I'm never invited to sit. I'm never thanked. I'm simply expected to be there. This Christmas was no exception. When Scott and I pulled into Catherine's driveway, freshly shoveled snow tipped me off. Martin, Scott's father, was home. Martin had been working abroad for years and rarely visited. I'd only met him a handful of times. Quiet, thoughtful, and seemingly unaware of much. Catherine always talked over me when he was around, and Scott never defended me. I spent the morning preparing dinner alone, while the 3 of them chatted in the living room. The roast was in the oven, the table set with 3 plates and 3 glasses of wine. None for me. Martin's voice drifted through the hallway. Laura, aren't you joining us for dinner? I stepped around the corner with a polite smile. I'll eat later. I still have dishes. She prefers staying busy, Catherine cut in. Scott chuckled. Besides, it's just the 3 of us. Less fuss this way. Martin frowned. Why only 3? Catherine sipped her wine. A daughter-in-law who can't give grandchildren should at least make herself useful. I froze in the doorway. Scott said nothing to defend me. In fact, he added with a smirk, we call her our weekend housekeeper now. She even answers to it. Martin's expression remained unreadable. He looked down at his plate, then back toward the kitchen. Does she have a name? My hands trembled as I returned to the kitchen. I grabbed the coffee grinder to prepare their usual after-dinner drink. Catherine was obsessed with her dark roast, freshly ground. If it wasn't perfect, she'd complain about my laziness. As I turned the handle, 1 coffee bean slipped and bounced on the floor. I stared at it, the tiny sound louder than everything else. Later, after dinner, Martin quietly entered the kitchen. I'm heading out for a bit. Want to join me for a coffee? I blinked. Me? Yes, you, he said with a small smile. You cooked. You deserve at least a cup of something warm. Scott raised an eyebrow from the living room. Where are you 2 going? Just out for a quick drink, Martin replied calmly. Catherine scoffed. You're not taking her, are you? What kind of woman runs off to a bar on Christmas? She's my daughter-in-law, Martin said evenly. And I think she deserves a little humanity. We left before they could protest. At a nearby bar, Martin ordered a beer. I had a whiskey soda. Quiet, soft music, a few scattered patrons. For the first time in years, I felt like a person. I spoke about fertility treatments, the heartbreak, the moment we were told I couldn't conceive. About Scott's change, Catherine's cruelty, the cut from $1,000 to $500 in allowance, blaming me for no longer needing fertility support, and the limits on my work. Martin listened quietly, without interruption or excuse. He just listened. After a long silence, he said, Catherine was never like this before. Controlling, yes, but cruel? No. That changed when Scott was born. She became entitled, possessive. I stayed because of the boy, but I left as soon as he moved out. Now I see she hasn't changed, just redirected her cruelty. He raised his glass to freedom, and to women like me who deserved better. We clinked glasses, but returning to the house, the storm hit. Scott and Catherine were waiting like gatekeepers. Out late? Catherine's voice was sharp. That's not very wife-like behavior. Scott crossed his arms. Seriously, Laura? Drinking with my dad? What kind of relationship is this? My stomach twisted. What are you implying? I asked quietly. You tell me, Catherine hissed. You can't give us a child, yet you've got energy for whiskey with my husband? Martin stepped forward. Enough. His voice cracked like thunder, freezing the room. Catherine. Scott. Sit down. We're going to have a talk. No one moved. Martin's face was set. They obeyed. I followed, unsure of what would happen. But I knew this Christmas was far from over. The silence was thick, like the air before a storm. Martin stood in the center, hands clasped behind his back. Catherine perched stiffly on the edge of the couch, glaring. Scott fidgeted, eyes darting between his parents and the floor. I sat in the corner, uncertain whether I was guest, prisoner, or something in between. Finally, Martin broke the tension. Catherine, Scott, I'm asking questions. Honest answers. No games, no sarcasm. Catherine raised an eyebrow. And if I refuse, I'll answer for you, Martin replied, calm but sharp. Starting with this, why is Laura, your daughter-in-law, cooking your holiday dinner, cleaning your house, and not even allowed a seat at the table? Because she likes to be useful, Catherine said dryly. She's not exactly busy raising children. My breath caught. Scott muttered, Mom. Martin turned to me. Laura, how much money does Scott give you each month? I hesitated, heat creeping up my neck. It started at $1,000 when I quit work, then dropped to $800, then $600, and now $500. $500 total, I admitted. Supposed to cover food, transit, clothes, everything. Catherine rolled her eyes. She doesn't have real expenses. No. Children taken care of, no work commute. She could handle it. Martin glanced at Scott. You think that's acceptable? Scott folded his arms. Dad, we're not swimming in money. We've had some financial setbacks. What setbacks? Martin pressed. Scott hesitated. Just normal stuff. Car repairs, rising bills. I pay the mortgage on this house, Martin interjected sharply. So what's draining your bank account? Catherine's eyes narrowed. That's none of your business. You're wrong, Martin said firmly. It became my business the moment you started treating Laura like a maid. And the second you pulled Scott into something clearly not normal. Scott finally blurted it out. It's Mom's debt. The room went quiet. I turned slowly toward him. What debt? Scott looked ashamed. She made some stock market investments around the time we stopped treatment. Supposed to be short-term, quick gains. Catherine jumped in defensively. Everyone was talking about that biotech company. It was a sure thing. And then it collapsed. Martin finished her thought. She bit her lip. We weren't the only ones who lost money. How much did you lose? Martin asked, already dreading the answer. Scott exhaled. 50,000. I felt dizzy. $50. 000. Catherine snapped. Don't act shocked. We were trying to build something for the family. What family? I said, my voice louder than I realized. You never treated me like I was part of one. Martin shook his head. You didn't tell me. You didn't tell Laura. But you took the money and kept spending like nothing happened. Catherine's jaw clenched. It wasn't his money. It was family savings. Money I earned. Martin exploded. Savings I worked for, hoping it would help our son and his wife, maybe for a down payment or a child's future. Instead, you gambled it away and used Laura as a stress outlet. Catherine trembled. I made a mistake, Martin. No, he said coldly. You made dozens. And it only gets worse, doesn't it? Scott stayed quiet. She used your name, didn't she? Martin asked. You're the cosigner. Scott nodded slowly. And that's why you cut Laura's allowance, to funnel money into repayments? Scott didn't answer. Say it, Martin demanded. Scott muttered. Yes, we had to make minimum payments. I felt sick. They reduced my support not because of hardship, but to secretly repay their mother's investment losses. She's my mom, Scott said helplessly. She needed help. I'm your wife, I replied. I needed respect. Martin turned sharply and left the room. We followed him upstairs. Where are you going? Catherine cried. To see what else you're hiding. He reached the walk-in closet and yanked the doors open. The sight took my breath away. Rows of designer handbags, boxes labeled Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Prada, drawers filled with gold and gemstone jewelry. Martin opened a drawer and pulled out a diamond-studded necklace, heavy and real. "These are all recent," he said. "You said you were working at a supermarket to repay debt. You said you were broke." "I bought those before things went bad," Catherine insisted. Martin held up a receipt. "This is dated 3 weeks ago." She paled. Scott turned to her. "You told me you stopped spending." "I needed something to feel normal," she yelled. Everything was falling apart. Martin dropped the necklace back in the drawer. "I'm done." "No, Martin, please. You humiliated Laura. You lied to your son. You stole our future." "I'm done pretending we're a family," he said. "You can't just leave. You don't even have a place to go." Catherine cried. "I do," he replied calmly. "I've been renting in Boston for over a year, quietly waiting." She looked stunned. "I'm divorcing you, Catherine. And I'm selling this house. You can take your bags and jewelry and find somewhere else to play queen." Scott stood frozen. "Wait, you're serious?" "I've never been more serious," Martin said. Then he turned to me and Laura. "I know you've been trapped in all this longer than I can imagine, which is why I brought these." He pulled a manila envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to me. "Divorce papers," he said simply. "For you and Scott. If you want out too." I didn't speak. I just stared at the envelope in my hands. Martin looked at me gently. "No pressure. But you deserve a life, not a prison sentence." Scott said nothing, hands clenched, face pale. For the first time in years, I had a choice, and that changed everything. I stayed up all night. The manila envelope sat on the kitchen table like a loaded question. Divorce. After all the years invested, all the pain swallowed, all the silence endured, was this the answer? I didn't cry. Not this time. I brewed black coffee and stared out the frost-laced window. Christmas lights twinkled from neighboring houses. Behind me, Scott's voice, Catherine's disgust, the clink of silverware, all the chaos we called family rattled in my mind like broken ornaments in a neglected box. At 6 a.m., I signed. No fanfare, no drama, just one pen stroke after another until my name was on the dotted line. Scott came down later, disheveled. "You're really going through with it?" he asked finally. I nodded. "I didn't mean for things to get this bad." "But you let them," I said calmly. "I was stuck in the middle," he muttered. "No, Scott. You chose a side. Every time you stayed silent, every time you handed me less money, every time your mother called me useless, and you did nothing, you chose." He didn't argue. There was no point. By afternoon, Martin had met a real estate agent. The house already drew interest, good location, high land value, even if the structure needed work. Catherine panicked. "You can't just throw me out," she screamed in the driveway as Martin loaded his car. "You threw Laura out emotionally years ago," he said. "You'll survive a lease. I can't afford rent. What am I supposed to do?" "Maybe sell a few handbags," he said without looking back. She glared at me. "This is your fault. You turned Martin against me." I stared back, calm but grounded. "You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." Scott stayed quiet during the move. When I asked about alimony and property division, he just nodded, agreeing to everything Martin's lawyer proposed. He looked smaller, less a man, more a boy still in his mother's shadow. I moved out first. Martin helped me find a modest but bright apartment on the east side near the river. Quiet, clean, and mine. He surprised me with a job offer. "I know someone at a downtown security firm," he said over coffee a week later. "They're hiring for internal accounting. Not glamorous, but stable." "Sounds perfect," I smiled. "You're sharp, Laura. Always the most level-headed in the room. You just forgot it for a while." Warmth spread through my chest. "Thank you for everything. I should have stepped in sooner." "But you did, when it counted," I replied. Catherine and Scott's story ended with foreclosure notices and debt collectors. Martin sold the house quickly. Someone wanted to build townhomes. Catherine had no savings, no plan, and moved into a crumbling apartment where Christmas lights hung year-round, not for cheer, but because no one could afford to take them down. She now works days at a grocery store and bartends nights. Scott picked up weekend work at a wedding hall. Ironic considering his marriage just ended. They struggled with rent, alimony, and her debt. Complaints were loud and frequent. Scott once left a voicemail, "You win. Happy now?" I didn't respond. This wasn't about winning. It was about surviving and healing. Months passed. Snow melted. Spring arrived. I started biking to work, stopping at a nearby bakery for fresh croissants. One morning, Martin surprised me with a small potted orchid. "For your desk," he said. "A new job needs a touch of life." We sipped coffee across from my office. "You seem lighter," he said. "I feel it," I replied. He studied me. "Do you regret anything?" I shook my head. I used to think not having a child meant I failed. But really, I just hadn't made room for myself yet. Martin smiled. "That's beautiful to say," he said. "It's beautiful to live," I answered. On my first big client audit, I dressed carefully. Navy blazer, cream blouse, mother's watch, hair pinned up. Standing by the mirror, I didn't look like someone needing saving anymore. I looked like someone who had finally saved herself, and that was enough. Stepping into the sunlight, I whispered to no one, "This time, I'm not trying to be a wife, mother, or a peacekeeper. I'm just me, and that is more than enough." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more dramatic tales of truth, betrayal, and resilience.